Hello, and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Take a look at the Piaggio P.108. Does it kind of look like it might belong in the American arsenal? Squint just a little. I think it does. Certainly more than the Cant trimotor. It looks like it wants to be a B-17. Okay, fine. I'll accept that a machine can't have an intention or a hope or a dream, but a designer can. Design and development. Giovanni Casaraggi had worked for multiple years in the USA for the Waco Aircraft Company before returning to Italy in 1936. Although I don't think he had anything to do with the construction of the B-17, it seems as if he wanted to, because the moment he got back to Italy and started working for Piaggio, he started designing an aircraft that looked like it could be an Italian cousin to the big Boeing. In some ways, a strategic bomber made sense for Italy. After all, this was the birthplace of Giulio Douhet, the father of the concept of strategic bombing. On the other hand, it made no sense at all, because the Regia Aeronautica had not actually picked up or adopted the doctrine of strategic bombing. However, it did fit in one other way. Italian aviation had been a major propaganda boon to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Competing for trophies such as the Schneider Cup had become one way, but also having an impressive size of air force, even though many of the number were obsolete biplanes, was another. Just having an impressive strategic bomber in the armory would be yet another opportunity to boast. Piaggio and Casaraggi got the go-ahead to build an Italian B-17. Prototypes. The first test version was the P-50, which was rolled out in 1938. Interestingly, it had its engines mounted in tandem fashion in common nacelles with a tractor and pusher prop at each end. The second prototype switched to a more conventional four-tractor arrangement that would lead to the final design of the P-108. On the 24th of August 1941, the Piaggio P-108B, for bomber version, took to the air. It was an impressive all-metal, low-wing bomber with a retractable undercarriage. It had a strong, yet heavy airframe. It was powered by four air-cooled 18-cylinder P-12 radial engines. These engines were actually made by putting together two Piaggio P-10 engines in tandem and turning a three-blade constant-speed propeller. These engines produced an impressive 1,500 horsepower at takeoff, but were to be hampered by reliability problems, and they had to work hard to haul the hefty aircraft into the air. 12 self-sealing fuel tanks held 3,100 US gallons of fuel, and 8 oil tanks, 2 per engine, carried a total of 90 US gallons of oil to keep those engines lubed. The 108 had a crew of 8. The multi-step nose saw the 2 pilots in the top step cockpit, with a gunner in the next one down, and finally the bombardier in the lowest step. The 108 was defended by 8 Breda Safat machine guns. One was in the nose, and another in a retractable ventral turret. There were also 2 waist guns. Although there was no tail turret, the 108 had a very impressive remote-controlled, hydraulically powered turret out on the wing behind each outer engine wing nacelle. This was controlled by a gunner in one of the 2 cupolas in the fuselage hump. It seems to me that the next time we would see such an arrangement on a bomber would be on the B-29. In its internal bomb bay, the 108 could carry 7,700 pounds of bombs in a mix depending on the target. It could carry a smaller number of 550 or 1,100 pounders, or a larger number of 220 or 110 pound weapons. In the design competition, the 108 finished second in performance to Cant's submission, but it finished first on price, so Piaggio got the contract. Production. This is where, most of the time, we talk about the impressive orders being placed and large numbers of aircraft beginning to roll out of the factories. But that is not the story of the 108. Although I cannot find a definitive number, no more than a few dozen were ever built, and they were only supplied to one squadron. Production was also hampered by tinkering on other variants with very different roles. For example, in 1940, Italy's plan to use the Boeing 307 Stratoliner fell through, and so a 108 with a wider, pressurized passenger cabin with 32 seats was ordered. The overworked Piaggio company got this prototype into the air in July 1942, but by that time, Italy had no more transatlantic lines for it to serve. Despite this, poor Piaggio was ordered to build 5 more units, which were called the C version. It was also having to build the T version, which was the military transport version. This had a large ventral door and internal cargo space able to haul 2 Machi C-200s, or 60 soldiers, or 8 torpedoes, or 13 tons of cargo. Only about 11 of these were ever finished. Lastly was the A, or Artiglieri, anti-shipping version. This had an internally mounted 90mm cannon with 50 or 60 rounds. It could also carry 3 torpedoes. They only built 1, and it was never used operationally. Operational history. The 274th Squadron began receiving the 108 in 1941, and the unit did have trouble transitioning to the heavy machine. There were several accidents, the most notable of them involving the son of Mussolini. On the 7th of August 1941, Bruno Mussolini, who was the commander of the Squadriglia, crashed into a house and was killed. P-108Bs were used in the Mediterranean and North African theater and participated in a raid against a destroyer on the 6th of June 1942. 10 350-pound bombs were dropped with no hits. Soon after, 108s hit Gibraltar in a night raid on the 28th of June. This first raid was pretty disastrous to the attackers. 1 aircraft turned back due to engine trouble, and then, although the target was hit, the remaining 4 aircraft ran low on fuel and were forced to make precautionary landings in Spain, and 1 crashed on return to Italy. 108s fought in North Africa during the Allies' Operation Torch. They did some damage during night raids, but they also suffered losses to Beaufighters. Without receiving prompt replacements, the unit was forced to withdraw from the battle. The 108 was last used in Sicily when the squadron had 8 machines. In 12 sorties, 2 108s were lost, and 2 others were badly damaged by night-fighting Beaufighters and Mosquitoes. With the armistice on the 8th of September 1943, some 108s were sabotaged, while the rest ended up with the Luftwaffe, these being used as transports on the Eastern Front. As far as I know, there are no survivors, although the starter engine from the 108 supposedly ended up being used to power Vespa scooters post-war, which, as a machine, has had a far more successful career than the poor 108 ever did. Hey viewers, if you like videos about obscure aircraft like this one, slam that super thanks button and be sure to subscribe. If you like to listen as well as watch, you can check out my audio podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can purchase Warbird t-shirts, toys, models, and other stuff at the Kit Shop. Until next time.